Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In Season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, I get to speak with Greg Rollet. He's an Emmy award-winning producer, best-selling author, and marketing expert. Now, I met him through a weird way. I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and I saw Greg's ad. And I was like, dude, this is exactly what I've been looking for. So I messaged him, signed up, got a call with him, and I was like, dude, this is amazing. So he has written for Mashable, Fast Company, Inc.com, and the Huffington Post, AOL, and others. And he has co-authored some best-selling books with Jack Canfield, Dan Kennedy, Robert Allen, and many other leading experts from around the world. Now, when I read that he's an Emmy award-winning producer and he's also a marketing expert, it's like those are two things that I would eventually like to get to. But Greg has been doing this for a while, and I'm so honored to have him on the podcast. Greg, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited, and I know we're going to have a good time.
Sweet, fantastic. So some of the things that I absolutely love, the story that I tell everybody is I love the process, the time that you go through to build yourself up. It's almost like the scene from Iron Man 2008 when he's in the cave and he's just got scraps and he builds an Iron Man suit in that room and all the tinkering that he's doing. So those are some of the things that like totally blow my mind. I love to see those hacks. I love to see those tinkering happening and how you bring things that don't even relate to and bring it all together into something that's just massive. And one of the awesome things I like to ask my guests is their journey. You know, how did they get here? Like a lot of the times we tell a story to everybody that is now well known, but there are some parts of those stories of that journey that's not known to everybody. So tell me a version of your journey that no one's heard of before.
Man, it's a great question because you're right. A lot of people hear like the bio that you read. A lot of people see me on stage when it's all polished, or semi-polished. Yeah. They see the presentation or the ad that you spend a lot of time on and it looks good to the outside world. But what they don't see is everything that went into, getting to that place. And so I love that question because,
exactly.
For me, two things. I love the what you said about Iron Man in the cave building his suit. But if you also watch the evolution of Iron Man, I'm a super comic book nerd, love the movies. Is every movie, he's still tinkering with the suit. He's still making it better. He's still, I was watching Infinity War. I have a 4-year-old, the other night. And, when Bruce Banner comes back and they're facing like Thanos's goons, if you will, for the first time. And Bruce Banner's like, how did you do that? And Iron Man's like, the new nanotech, and so it's this constant evolution to always be your best self. And, a lot of people think that it's it's a destination. Like when I do this, my life will be perfect. When I hit this plateau, when I hit this milestone, the heavens will open and, it's all unicorns and rainbows. And the truth of the matter is we're always getting better. We're always, trying to be the best version of ourselves. And so, I'll start kind of back with a little bit of the version that people probably don't know about me is, I wasn't poor growing up, but I wasn't rich. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't know that my parents lacked in a lot of areas because you're a kid, you don't know. Right. And, looking back now, I know that my dad had to work overtime to buy the extra baseball gloves or to sign me up for travel league and, things like that. And I knew from a very young age, it was about 16 when I was allowed to go get a job, that if I was going to have the nice things, if I was going to be able to afford to go to the nice dinners, if I was going to be able to, go on a date. It wasn't going to be my parents that were going to do it for me. It was going to be me. Like, it was up to me. If I wanted, an extra $20 to go to the movies, I had to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was like the week that I turned 16, I walked, because I didn't have a car. So I walked over to the local Target and applied for a job. And I got to be a stock guy, and I got to work from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. because it was after school, but it was still early enough to where, you weren't, working until like midnight or the overnight shift. Yeah. And, I stocked shelves at Target for, a year, 2 years, making $6 an hour, but every single paycheck I got, it allowed me to take that next step to, again, like silly things, like go on that date, go to the movies, but, not go to the restaurant with everybody and you have to split an appetizer 5 ways because you can't afford your own food. And so it was that understanding that led me into, all right, well, if I can make $6 an hour here, what are other opportunities, other ways that I can, create income for myself? And that obviously led into entrepreneurship. The early days of entrepreneurship for me was all in the rap game, the hip hop game, which is weird for like the white kid, coming from, Coral Springs, Florida. But
I don't think that's that weird. I mean, we see Vanilla Ice, we see, some of these guys that have been rapping, the BC Boys, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you saw that, but what I saw, so this is late 90s, 2000, 2001.
Okay.
It was the era of like the hip hop mogul, right? So it was Puff Daddy, it was, Jimmy Iovine, it was Master P, it was Cash Money Records. It was all of these like CEOs of these record labels that were becoming the stars.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, oh, this is awesome. And so like Master P is one of the stories that, again, weird reference, but that's like who I saw is like, no one wanted to give this guy a record deal. No one was going to give him studio time. No one was going to give him distribution. So he said, you know what? I'll do it myself. And he, signed himself and his two brothers, Silk the Shaka and C Murder, to his own label, right? And he created his own label, No Limit Records. And he started, recording them with, his own money. And then he would go to the swap meets and he would go to the local house parties and go to the clubs and sell his CDs, there. And he became, he created so much momentum and created so much noise that Priority Records came to him with, hey, we'll give you $30 million if you can distribute your albums. Yeah. So he created all the leverage by not waiting for the record label, but creating such demand for his music that the record label came with that, kind of an offer. And so I saw that and I was like, this is incredible. Like no one's going to knock on my door and sign me to a record deal. No one is going to, just give me free studio time. No one believes in me for this. So you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. And that's exactly what I did. I moved from Target to waiting tables at a Mexican restaurant. Mm-hmm. And, I'd make $100 on Friday night. I'd make $100 on Saturday night. And then on Sunday, I'd take my $200 down. I still remember it was Dancetarium Studios. It was $40 an hour. So I could get 5 hours of studio time on Sunday. And I recorded my first album that way. And then, I still took my $100 on my, on Friday night, $100 on Saturday night. And then I went to this local manufacturing place and, printed 1,000 CDs and, with my own money. And then I went to parties on Friday nights and Saturday nights and sold CDs for $5 a piece. And, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, you sell 100 CDs on a Friday night at $5 a piece, you walk out with $500 cash. Like, you're a baller. Like, that's good money for, a 17-year-old kid with, no bills and, no real responsibility. So it was just always that understanding of, and it's one of the lessons that I teach now is people wait for permission. They wait for somebody to say, you know what, now you can start a podcast because you've hit this milestone in your career. Or now you can write this book, or now you can start this TV show, or now you can start your business, or now, like, we're always waiting for somebody to say that it's okay.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's on us to say, you know what, this is what I want to happen in my life. And I have to make it happen. And I'm going to take whatever steps are necessary so that I can live the life that I really want to live. And I, somehow I found that at a young age. And I think it was just the environment around me is I was around all these rich kids who had the nice car, who had the nice clothes. And I wanted that, but I knew my parents were never going to give it to me. So anyway, I hope that's kind of a little bit of the origin story that peeks behind the hood a little.
Absolutely. That was beautiful because what you mentioned, you've got to do it for yourself. Nobody's going to hand it to you. Like, here's that record deal you've been looking for. No. And it's like what Master P did, right? Is it Master P?
Yeah, Master P.
Right, Master P. And if my son was here, he'd be laughing his head off. Master P, right? He made his own studio. He's like, it's not rocket science, right? You figure it out. You make your studio. You make it happen. And that's exactly what our good friend Kevin Hart did to become a movie mogul. Because I read his book, and he's like, uh, he was going through this stuff, but he had a good foundation where his mother taught him to be always resilient, always keep working, never sitting down doing nothing. So he was a stand-up comedian. He got a deal to be on a TV show. That TV show made him wait for a whole year in Hollywood. He's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going back to my comedy nights. And he started doing that. And he learned from Dane Cook to build his email list. So when you go to a city that you're going to be touring on or doing a comedy show, you tell all the people, hey, Kevin Hart's coming to town. Come check him out. And he built his entire foundation on being super popular. Now Hollywood just goes to him and be like, hey, come be in my come be in my movie, come and be in our movie and write your own dialogue. And that's what Kevin Hart has, and that's what you built for yourself. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you come in that situation, you're coming with the leverage.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what Kevin Hart did. He said, exactly. Hey, look, I'm already selling out all these clubs. I already have all this material. I already have this legion of fans. I already have this database. The same thing, I was about Master P is like, look, I'm already selling tens of thousands of records on my own. You come with the leverage when you go out to, and this is something I did when I was trying to get into TV is I was trying to look for the agent. But I needed the agent more than the agent needed me. And that puts me in a vulnerable spot, either to get taken advantage of or get the crappy jobs now I'm like, hey, I already have, I've already done all these documentaries. I've created my own TV show. I got distribution on it. Like I have leverage now, that I've created on my own. And again, so many people are waiting for, to get funding for their business and then they'll start, or they're waiting for, but if you create your business and you create customers and you have a customer, like, again, now you have leverage. So when you go into a funding situation, you can say like, look, I already have this, I don't need it. When you can say that you don't need the help, but you really do actually want the help because you have other people around you to push you further. Like Kevin Hart needs studios and the marketing and the big dollars to get him to that global reach. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he could also walk away from it. And he has the power to say no, knowing that he can go back to his own database and sell out clubs. And, and so that power of, you know what, you need me more than I need you is just such a lovely place, but it requires you to put in work. It requires you to, put in the sweat equity. It requires you to have some self-motivation. And that's hard for a lot of people. It's really difficult to say that, you know what, my future is in my own hands and I'm going to work every single day in order to create that life or to take that one step forward. Jack Canfield, one of my mentors and who I've got to work a lot with, says, when you're going on, like, let's say a road trip, right? You don't know every street that you're going to be turning on. You don't necessarily know what the highway looks like 100 miles from where you are now. You just know that your headlights are showing you the next, 100 yards. And most of the times in life, that's all you need is like, what's the next thing I need to do? And then once you do that next thing, the next 100 yards will open and it'll appear, right? So it's like when you're driving, you only see the next 100 yards, but as you travel and you continue moving forward, the next part of the road will appear and the next part of the road will appear. You turn the corner and the next part of the road will appear. Same is true in life. Like I didn't know what I was doing when I was recording albums, but I recorded the first song and then you record the second song. And then when you're done recording, you go, all right, what's the next thing I need to do? Instead of saying, seeing somebody right now, they see whatever celebrity guru, person they look up to, and all they see is Kevin Hart now. It's really hard for you to go from zero to Kevin Hart now. But
it's very hard.
And go to those nightclubs. You can, do what I did and work in a Mexican restaurant, record your album. Like you have to think about what's your next step to get you where you want to go. Don't think when you start thinking you need to be Kevin Hart today, that's where it gets so overwhelming and you never start. You never take that first step because it is impossible. Like looking at it that way, it's impossible to be Kevin Hart. Looking at it like, how do I book my first comedy show? What do I need to do today to book my first comedy show? That becomes a much simpler step. And then once you book that show, what's the next step? How do I fill the room? How do I market it? How do I create the material for it? And so think about it one step at a time without losing sight of where you want to go.
Amazing, amazing. You're absolutely right. It's like um you look at Mount Everest and you're like, hey, I want to be on top. Well, you've got to climb. You got to get to base camp. You got to get to the second base camp. You got to climb that mountain. You can't jump up 20 flights of stairs without taking that first step. Excellent points. And that's what I did for myself. I was like, I've been wanting to have a podcast running for the past, 7 years, since 2012. And I even started one with my cousins. And that went well for like 4 episodes. But then we were in different time zone. We didn't have all the software in place. We didn't have all of the mindset in place to get it going. But then last year I was like, all right, this is it. I've got to do it and nobody else is going to help me. I got to do it on my own. And luckily I found this amazing distribution platform. It was like, you could do this on your mobile phone. And I was commuting for 2 hours every day. I was like, this is the best time that I can record my podcast. And I started talking about my hobbies, and this is where we are today. It's been a pretty amazing journey, and it's always a learning. You're always learning new things and adding to the journey and adding to where we are going tomorrow.
Exactly. And again, you're always getting better in the process, right? Like you're always building the next Iron Man suit. I'm sure that this interview is better than your first interview.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
20 interviews from now, you're going to look back at this one and be like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. Now I'm so much better. But you don't get better unless you do,
Exactly.
right? Like reading another book about podcasting, buying another course. And this is what people do. They mistake the buying of the course, the buying of the book, the watching of the video with actual accomplishment, right? And they say, all right, I bought the course on podcasting, therefore I'm a podcaster. Like, no, what you've done is you said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. That's gotten you so much better. You're like, all right, now I recorded the first episode. How do I edit it? How do I create the artwork? How do I get it on iTunes? How do I get it on Spotify? How do I get it here? How do I find guests? Like, but you have to do. Otherwise, you're just on the hamster wheel. And I see so many people, and you've joined the inner circle, so you've gotten to see a little bit of what I do and how I coach people. But there are people that are, been in my coaching groups for 3 months, 6 months, and I almost like want to give them all their money back because they're in the same spot because they'd rather watch another video, they'd rather listen to another podcast than go out and actually do. And I call it consuming versus creating. And you want to stop consuming at some point, and you want to start creating. And something that I find myself doing, this is a tip for everybody who's listening right now, is if you find yourself scrolling Instagram and you're 10 minutes in and you're like, I'm wasting time and wasting my life now, stop and create something. It is the creators who get rewarded, not the consumers, right? The consumers are spending the money to go watch, Iron Man. The creator, the people creating that movie are the ones getting rich right now. The people who are creating the podcast are the ones who are building audience and building brand equity and building value with an audience. The ones who are consuming the podcast, yes, are you getting information? Are you getting? Of course you are. But it's the creator who is always ultimately going to win at the end of the day. And so if you find yourself in that consumption mode where you're just consuming Instagram, consuming Facebook, consuming YouTube, consuming podcasts, stop. And, if it's Instagram's an easy one, because if you're stop and post something, and post a photo with a tip, right? If you're listening to a podcast, a little harder to just stop listening to a podcast and create your own, right? But, stop the consumption, start the creating. And, I'm sure even in your own journey so far, like it's been really good for you, right? You're discovering yourself, you're meeting great people, you're having good conversations, and it's so much better for you as the creator now. That there's so many benefits to that as opposed to being the one as the consumer.
Exactly. And what I find myself is I'm not consuming content like I used to anymore. Like I go to LinkedIn and I'm scrolling. I'm like, all right, stop, because I'm not adding anything to the story. Sure, I'll go in and I'll engage with the poster. I'll comment, because then I'm creating a conversation. I'm continuing a conversation. But if I'm just a mute looking through this thing, well, I'm not adding anything valuable to the conversation or what the poster is talking about.
Yeah, it's just intent, right? So consumption with intent is different. Like you and I were talking right before we went live of you're going on LinkedIn to find like really cool guests and people you want to learn from. Like that is intent as opposed to just the mindless scrolling of what are people up to and let me just kill some time.
Right.
So having that intent of, I want to be an actor. So let me go on LinkedIn and, spend 30 minutes looking for agents or looking for acting coaches or looking for production companies and, seeing how I can start developing those relationships. There's a difference in active consumption versus passive consumption. And I think you've made that switch now. And if everybody listening can just slightly make that switch, look, dude, I don't have superpowers. I scroll through Instagram all the freaking time, right? Like I'm not immune to it.
Right.
But have some intent, like, all right, I'm going to go look for guests for my podcast, or I'm going to go do that. That just, it gives you the leverage as opposed to being consumed to.
It's like goal driven versus like, all right, I'm just spending time to spend time because I'm just so tired of my mind being full.
Exactly.
Sweet.
Spot on.
Thanks, man. So yeah, it's been a pretty crazy journey, and I find myself like I'll go and communicate and talk, but then I'm also not listening to a lot of the podcasts. I'm not doing any of the listening or consuming, but I'm also finding myself I need to sit down and I need to write. I need to create content, and it also takes strategy, right? You got to have some kind of strategy behind the creation of that content too, because a lot of the times people will, let's say, just start posting. They're like, oh, great, I'm posting. And then they run out of steam after 2 weeks, or they run out of steam after, a destined time and your book and the awesome video journal that you sent us. That's the one that pulled me in, right? That video journal is amazing. It's got 52 weeks of what it is that you can talk about in your videos. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, you made some really valid points, and it raises all right, so what do I do, right? I've been podcasting or blogging or creating videos for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I'm not creating traction, right? And it's very easy to give up when you post your video on YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, wherever you post it, and you're like, all right, I got 9 views, right? Or 90 views, or just like you spend all of this time, thinking about it, creating it, editing it, posting it, creating the best caption, adding the hashtags, whatever that you do, and then crickets, and then it's just quiet. And so what a lot of creators fail to do, and there's a couple things, these aren't in particular order, is one, they forget about the marketing part of it, right? Like you have to market your content because you're competing with so much other content. I spent some time with Lewis Howes. He was in one of the episodes of Ambitious Adventures, the reality show we did that's on Amazon right now. And, we were asking him all about podcasting and how he's built his podcast. And, the question, I'm sure everyone asked this to him, but we asked it as well. We said, Lewis, what advice do you have to someone starting a podcast today? And his advice was really enlightening. He said, don't. And, obviously you're a little taken aback, but you're like, all right, so obviously explain, like, what do you mean? And he says, look, no one needs another entrepreneur show with entrepreneurs interviewing other entrepreneurs, because they already have my show or Tim Ferriss's show, or, and who would you rather listen to, Joe Smith, who, doesn't have a brand, doesn't have a following, or Tim Ferriss, or Lewis Howes, or Gary Vaynerchuk, or, now you have all these big brands coming into the fold, with NPR and these big, so the competition for time, because if a podcast is an hour, like Joe Rogan's are like 2 to 3 hours, if you're listening, if Joe Rogan's one of your favorite podcasters and Tim Ferriss is one of your favorite podcasters, if they each only did one episode a week, that'd be like 4 to 5 hours of content. Yeah. How many more podcasts can you actually listen to when you're consuming these guys already? So his whole point wasn't not to create a podcast. It's where do you fit in? So you're not just another blank. You're not just another entrepreneur podcast. You're not just another lifestyle podcast. You're not just another whatever it is. So so that's a big piece of it is in positioning. And I love what you've done here with like hacks and hobbies is like, it's not just an entrepreneur podcast. It's not just you're helping to find these hacks and these little things and how all these hobbies fit together and that people are multidimensional and they don't have like, so finding that lane I think is really important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise who are you going to listen to? You or John Lee Dumas, you or Pat Flynn, you or like, I'm just using entrepreneurs because that's the space that I'm in. But, we only have a finite amount of time and we're not talking about a 2-minute video on YouTube. We're talking about, this, you and I here today, even, 30 to 45 minute episode. Like that's a lot of time in someone's life. Yeah. Why are they going to choose to listen to this over something else? So that's thing one. Thing number two with it is that, aggressive promotion, aggressive marketing, whether that's spending money on ads, whether that's building an email list, whether that's leveraging the guests and their platforms to build your audience. But you can't just post something on iTunes and hope that someone's going to discover it because there is so much other things that they could discover, which, just blows people's mind, but they never really think about, how am I going to get my message and get attention for my message? And that could be anything from headlines to the guests that you choose to, how can I, whenever I talk to somebody about creating a podcast, it's how can you go and interview people who no one's interviewing, but people might find really interesting. So I work with a lot of real estate agents and I'm like, it would be a great podcast if you went out and interviewed the best pool builder in your area, because guess what? He's never been interviewed on a podcast before. Yeah. He's going to think it's super cool. He has a customer list of, hundreds of pools that he's built. So he's going to email all those people out and say, hey, check out my, interview. It's on iTunes. Like again, a pool builder, that's really cool. So someone like me, I'm like, dude, I got like dozens of interviews on iTunes. It's not that I'm still like flattered that people want to talk to me and ask me questions, but different than finding somebody new. If you're in the, marketing space, instead of interviewing all the internet marketers or digital marketers, can you go interview the head of marketing at Red Bull? Like that's cool and interesting and unique. Can you interview the head of marketing at Burger King when they're doing all these cool, because A, no one's interviewing them, and B, they have a different audience. Like you got to find those approaches and leverage their audiences to build your own. So, and then the last thing I'll kind of say about it. Yeah. And the reason I think people give up really easily is because they think it's about them and not the audience. Oh. You have to be audience focused first. You have to deliver some type of value to the audience and stop thinking it's about you. It's not about you, the interviewer. It's not about you making flubs. It's about the audience. And when you make that switch, because now you're mission driven. Now I'm creating this podcast so I can help other people. If you're creating the podcast just to help yourself or feed your ego or think it's going to grow your business, you will give up when you don't see that traction because there's not a bigger purpose or bigger mission. But if everything that you do, like every video that I put out, it's not about me. I don't care how I look. I don't care if I'm wearing a hat and a hoodie or a suit or if I stumble or if my hair's not like perfect, because it's not about me. It's about the audience. Like even in the delivery I'm doing now, like I'm trying to deliver as much value as I can and actionable content for your audience. So your audience goes, man, that episode with Greg was awesome. Yeah. And now they want to listen to more of your episodes. And now they want to go seek me out. It's not about me. It's about the audience. And when you have that in mind, all you need to do is, at the end of the day, like, this is how I judge it. If I get one good message that was like, Greg, I watched that and it changed my life, or I did this and it helped me grow my business, or, I stopped, scrolling Instagram and I posted something on Instagram today and I got 30 likes. It's the first time I've ever gotten 30 likes. That's the coolest reward for me in the entire world. It's about the audience. If it's just about you, you will quit after 4 episodes and you're only getting 20 views on an episode. But if it's about the audience, every single person that watches, even if it's only 20, is an opportunity for you to make a difference, to make an impact, to, do something really cool. So it's kind of my, at least initial thought process on, starting something and gaining traction, and hopefully that's helpful.
No, absolutely. That was just amazing. And so it falls right in point with how the movie industry or how the TV industry works even, right? There's hundreds of pilots that production houses create, and then they do a survey like, okay, how many people like this pilot, right? It's audience driven. If people don't like that pilot, they're not going to go with that show. Is that about right?
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. Is just like, do people care about the show or do people not care about the show? And, do they think that it has legs? Does it have the right ensemble? Does it have the right, does it have the right chemistry between the characters and the writers, and all of these different factors? But it's all the stuff that I kind of just talked about. Is does it fill a need in the marketplace, or is it just something that the TV and movie industry is really bad at? Is they see something working and then they copy it 100 times.
Just copy it,
right? Yeah. So Game of Thrones is watching, so we need a dragon, show. I don't watch Game of Thrones, so I don't know. But Walking Dead is working, so we need a zombie show. We need instead of how do we fill a need in the marketplace? Where's the gap? Where's the opening? And those are the shows that tend to break out. Is Game of Thrones worked because at the time there was nothing like it. Walking Dead worked because at the time there was nothing like it. You don't want to be the third version of The Walking Dead. Who cares about that? So find your unique place. And to me, those are the shows that really they break out. Like a show like This Is Us. It is like nothing else on TV. Every episode makes my wife cry, bawling tears. That's not uplifting. That's not about dragons. That's not comedy. That's not it's because it filled a hole in the marketplace instead of just another Me Too copycat of the marketplace.
That's a really good point, because I never thought of that, just Hollywood just copies, but that does make sense. They come up with a formula and they use that formula on every single thing that they make. And sometimes they'll deviate. And I think that's what Marvel has been doing with their MCU. And they've deviated, but then they've kept that core formula about the same. So all the origin stories look something similar, but then they have a different angle in each of the movies. And some of the examples that I'm thinking of is Iron Man. Then we have Doctor Strange. Incredible Hulk. They started it twice and they're like, all right, it's not going to work. We're just going to keep on going and start a new trajectory. And then Captain Marvel, same thing. Black Panther, similar thing. So really well done movies that taken that formula and then they've modified it for their audience, for what story they're telling. So that's what we got to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one path to success, right? Like Captain Marvel is a different movie than Iron Man, right? Mm-hmm. Now, yes, they're both superheroes. Yes, there's the story arcs might be similar, as in underdog finds powers, has evildoer, defeats evildoer, but they're completely unique movies. And in the entrepreneur landscape, we see this a lot. Is there's a big product launch, or there's someone teaching you how to podcast, and 1,000 people buy the course, and now there's 1,000 people that are just clones of the original. We don't, like I said earlier, like Lewis is, we don't need another entrepreneur podcast with people interviewing entrepreneurs, because it already exists. We don't need someone else being Gary Vee, dropping F-bombs, talking about content, because Gary Vee already exists. Where is your lane? Now, can you, like, your show is an interview show, right? You didn't have to reinvent the wheel on let's find cool guests, let's ask them cool questions, let's leverage their audience to build mine. But you were doing it in your unique way. Like the first question you asked me is a question I've probably done 60, 70 podcast interviews. I was never really asked that question before. You found a way in. So yes, you're still going to put your podcast on iTunes, because you'd be stupid not to, right? But you're going to do it with your own artwork and your own, as opposed to just copycatting everything else that is out there. So the world doesn't need more copycats. It doesn't mean that you don't find a model and make it yours, but don't just copy them. Like we don't need more of the same. We need you to be you. You were put on this earth. I believe that you have a unique ability. I learned that from Dan Sullivan. And play to your strengths. Be weird. Be unique. Be whatever it is. Now, follow, like, if podcasting, like, there are people that have successful podcasts. What do they do? So model it, but find your own way of delivering it, instead of just, hey, I bought this course, and in this course they said, here are the 10 questions to ask every guest, and here's like, that's, dude. And trust me, I've been on those shows. They suck, right? They're boring. There's no personality. I'm just like, so. Yeah, you got to find a way to uniquely be you, which
amazing.
It sounds super easy, but it's actually really hard for people to uniquely be themselves, because they feel like they have to present themselves in a different way to get people to like them, or they got to be like this other person who's popular. If they're not like that, it's not going to be popular. But the opposite is the truth. Like before Gary Vee, there was no business person dropping F-bombs on stage.
Nobody,
he was the first. He was uniquely himself. Now the problem is there's a ton of other business coaches dropping F-bombs on stage trying to be Gary Vee. Now it's not. Like now you're just copycatting the original.
Yeah. Excellent points, man. That just blew my mind. So, I mean, we're so in sync. It's just insane. I love it. What are some of your motivations for things that you do? And I think a lot of the things we talked about in the past, in through our conversation, you mentioned some of your motivations, but what are some of, like, it's always evolving, it's always changing. So how do these motivations changes as you go forward?
Yeah, I can tell you now, being a dad, like that's everything to me.
Oh
Is
yeah.
I want to be the best dad on the face of the planet, and nothing is more important. And so, with that being a motivator,
Yeah.
I've structured my business in a way that I get to be the best dad first, and my business revolves around that.
Yeah.
So many people do it the other way. They let circumstance happen to them. They let clients take advantage of them. They, jump whenever, they how high whenever anyone says jump. And I've structured it the complete opposite way. Like we did this interview at 10 o'clock in the morning. The reason I scheduled it for 10 is I don't get to the office till 9:30. I hang out with my kids till 9. I'm up at 5:36. I usually do a gym session. I make them breakfast. I make coffee. We watch some Sports Center. We hang out. I play some Legos. Then I go to the office. I don't take a meeting before 10 o'clock, and it could be the most important business meeting on the face of the planet. And they're like, I got to do it at 9. I'm like, I'm sorry. I have these strict rules. I learned this from one of my mentors, Craig Ballantyne, is just have rules for your life. That's one of my rules. My other rule is 5 o'clock is my end time. I don't do dinner meetings. I don't do calls at night. I don't do 5 o'clock is my end time. So I work from 9:30 to 5, and now does that mean like at 11 o'clock, some nights I'll go on the patio and I'll write, or I'll be great. Like, of course I will, right? Because I love what I do. But for me, my motivation is being the best dad on the face of the planet. And then during 9:30 to 5, I have the freedom and the capability to be the best freaking business owner, coach, content creator that I can be, because I know from 9:30 to 5, I get to be that person, right? I'm not worried about, all right, well, I have to go do this for the kids. Like my wife takes care of it. Like from that time, that is concentrated, focused, kick butt, take names on the business. But then at 5 o'clock, that hat comes off, and I get to be dad mode. And so people that try to juggle, like, all right, I got to do this, then I got to do this, then I got to do this, and now I got to do, like, that's really hard for me. Like today is a day of almost all calls. So I got podcast interview, I got sales calls, I got onboarding calls, but it's calls. And so I get to get in the zone, I get to be in the flow state, and I get to do that. I get to focus on that, as opposed to I got to write an email, then I got to do a call, then I got to do a sales presentation, then I got to do a webinar, then that's really hard for me to do and to be my best self. So structuring my day in that way, all leading to the original question, which is, I'm a dad. Like that is my motivation. And every business decision I make is this going to allow me, does this take me away from that? Or does it allow me to do that? So, even in the inner circle, which you're now a member of, I do all my coaching calls at, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, not 7, 8 o'clock at night, like most marketing business teachers, because that's kid time. That's way more valuable to me. And, so some people are turned off by that. That's not my client. I've decided that if you're like, screw you, Greg, I can't make 10 o'clock in the morning, then guess what? Just unsubscribe. I know that there's abundance out there. There's enough people that I can help. And so my motivation is structuring everything so that I can coach the T-ball games. I can be there for going to the mood. Like, to me, that is everything. And that's changed. Like you said, like it's evolved, 7 years ago before kids, it was much different, right? I was a hustler, but so, that's the current motivation.
I love it because, see, I'm a dad myself, and I initially had my interview times only on Thursdays because that's when I would be home from certain times. And then now I was like, all right, I can't start my interviews before 10 o'clock because I've got to drop off my kid to school. I've got things going on. And now summer is coming. So now it's going to be even more restricted timing. Like after 3 o'clock, my calendar is closed because it's kid time, So I love that motivation. A really great podcast that I've been listening to, First Class Fatherhood. I've had the opportunity to edit some of the episodes for the host, and there's some really cool guests on there. I think Sugar Ray's top lead singer was on there once. I would recommend you be on there as well, because there's a lot of fatherhood related questions and a lot of cool stuff in there. Really powerful.
That's awesome.
Cool, man. So we've had really amazing conversation, but there are some core questions at the end of the episode that I'd like to ask my guest. What is one hobby that you wish you got into but never had the chance?
Man, it's a great question. I think now as a dad, my kids are starting to be like wanting to be more like outdoor adventurous.
Hmm.
And I just never really enjoyed fishing or camping or that kind of stuff growing up.
Yeah.
But now it is like a skill or a hobby that I wish I had because now I'm having to like learn it on the fly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more being more outdoors, being more hands on, being
Yeah.
able to whether it's hunt, fish, like even if I caught a fish today,
Mhm.
to eat for dinner, like I don't know
Yeah.
how to skin it. I don't know how, like, I wish I knew some of those more hands-on skills. And and having that as a hobby, I think would have been really, really cool.
Yeah.
I've dove into some newer hobbies lately. I don't know if you and I've talked about, like, I'm
Mhm.
super now into like archery, which is kind of a weird hobby,
Nice.
but like that is like one of my favorite things on the planet to do. And
Nice.
it was definitely out of my comfort zone. I went to like a local archery range and like I knew nothing. I knew no terminology. I didn't know what kind of I'm just like being
Yeah.
vulnerable and like help me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doing that. It's the coolest hobby that I have because to me it's very therapeutic and meditative.
Hmm.
Um, but the hobby I wish I had was the little more of those outdoors hobbies, those outdoor skills.
Nice. Very cool. All right. We've talked a lot about movies and TV shows. What is one of your favorite ones?
Dude, as cliche as it is, like, dude, I will watch every Iron Man movie 1,000 times.
Oh my
And my
God.
4-year-old is now obsessed with superheroes. And so I
Yeah.
get to watch them all over
Oh,
again with him. And so we're
yeah.
watching almost all of them, like from start to finish.
Mm.
And, getting to relive it, not just to relive the movies for myself, but through
Yeah.
his eyes and
Yeah.
seeing that him wear the Iron Man suit for the first time and his eyes just light up. Like, is
Yeah.
that real? Like, is Tony Stark real? Like, you're going to New York next week for a business trip. Are you going to go to Avengers Tower and just like, but just getting lost in those worlds
Yeah.
of possibility and dreaming big and heroism and putting someone else's life ahead of yours, like just all the
Yeah.
lessons that are in those movies. They can be cheesy comic book movies,
Exactly.
or you can really see them as an opportunity to see how big the world is.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I choose to see them for.
I've been constantly watching review videos on YouTube of Avengers Endgames, what's coming up in the future for, uh, you know, Far From Home, Spider Man, and it's just amazing. Like, there's so many. Like, I know a lot of these things over the years, but then it's funny when they talk about it again. Like, oh, it's this arc, it's that arc. It's just amazing to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's masterful storytelling,
Yeah.
and the way that they were able to weave so much into
Mhm.
Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
That just, I mean, just to be able to think, like most of us think, what are we doing tonight for dinner?
Yeah. Yeah.
These people are thinking 15 movies down the line. How do we throw in some Easter eggs that are gonna come in and just
Yeah.
it's super cool.
It is. What and this is a new question that I've added. And what movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
Mm, it's a great question.
Thank you.
I really enjoy that, like, badass like spy person. So
Mhm.
like a James Bond, like a
Mhm.
Jason Bourne, like an Ethan Hunt from like the
Yeah.
Mission Impossibles.
Yeah.
The ability to have those skill sets,
Mhm.
is just it is incredible.
Yeah.
Almost like Bond, I go to because he not that he has it all. Like, look, he's
Yeah.
got a lot of messed up things, in the head, but to be able to wear the tuxedo and go to the nice event, to drive the fancy car, but then to have
Yeah.
that set of skills, like I don't know, like that just seems, obviously it's every guy's like fantasy to like be in those kind of roles, but why
Yeah.
not? Like it encompasses a lot of what I feel, would just be super badass.
Nice. I love it. All right. Who is your favorite superhero? And I think we've been talking about this. Favorite
Who's
super.
a superhero?
Yeah.
It's going to be a different answer because the easy answer
Okay.
is Iron Man, but actually my favorite superhero right now is the Green Arrow. And
Oh.
what I like, so Green Arrow, I'm a big fan of Nightwing,
Mm.
not as much Batman, but
Yeah.
Batman. And so here's the reason why.
Mhm.
They're all regular people that decided to rise up and do something great.
Yeah.
The Green Arrow didn't get bit by a spider. He doesn't have a suit made of armor. Like, it's
Mhm.
him and a bow,
Yeah.
and the skill set and all of those things. That to me, and he decided that it's on me to take care of my city, to take care of my people, to take care of my family. And to me, like that's cool, because it's almost like any one of us can rise up and be that superhero. And I think that's why I fell in love with that character from the TV show. But now I've gone back and I've spent too many dollars on, getting all the old comics and going through the mythology and just, seeing how that person has evolved as someone who decided, I'm not going to let my life go to waste without doing what's right, not for me, but for my city, for my family, and for the people around me.
Was that one of the reasons why you also got into archery?
100%. Yeah. So actually got into archery and also ninja warrior training. Nice. So I go to a ninja warrior gym here called Ninja Fit, and it's like CrossFit mixed with ninja warrior training. It's amazing. And part of it was because of the show Arrow. I wanted to do the salmon ladder. Like that was like, and so that's the reason. And now I've stayed at the gym for like 3 years, and it's been incredible and just transformation in myself. But yeah, that was kind of the reason to get into archery and all that was, again, it's a skill that I can learn. Like I can't learn to be Superman, right? No. I can't learn to be Spider-Man, but you can learn some of these tactical skills,
absolutely,
by putting in the work.
Absolutely. Sweet, man. Last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
I actually really, I enjoy Monopoly. I just, the idea of the game of, there's chance and there's luck, but there's also strategy. There's, you're developing short-term assets that turn into long-term assets. Like just the way I think about business is a lot into that game. Nice. So let's go Monopoly.
Nice. I love it. Where can my audience find you?
Yeah, I think, just to interact, to say hi, to see what I'm up to. Instagram is probably my favorite place right now. Just at Greg Rollet, just my name on Instagram. It's the same thing on Facebook. But Instagram's really cool. We do have that video planner that you picked up. It's free. All you gotta do is pay shipping and handling. Right now, at the time we're recording this, it's like $6 and change.
Nice.
You can grab one of those at ambitiousvideoplanner.com. And it'll help you to do really what we talked about here in this episode, which is stop consuming, start creating. But if you don't know where to start, you're like, I want to start creating, but I don't know what to say in my videos, or I don't know, how to outline them. This will get you started really, really quickly. And I think that's a really cool tool, for $6 to figure out how you can go ahead and get started. But yeah, follow on Instagram, grab a video planner. If you liked what I said, that's a great way to support what we're doing and get into my world at a deeper level.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg, for your time. This was an amazing conversation. I loved every single minute of it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, man. This was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode on Hacks and Hobbies. We absolutely appreciate your contribution. You can find additional notes on hacksandhobbies.com. Please share the podcast with your friends and tell them what you learned about our guest today.